Watcher, of course, our next guest, 3 premiership player with Port Adelaide, but
Yes.
also a huge
everybody.
development role with the South Australian Under-18 State Development Squad. And we've got some stars coming through there, so we thought we'd get Tony Bamford in, talk about his career and find out what's happening. Tony, welcome to the show, mate.
G'day, guys. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, mate. Hey, obviously Queensland was home for you, mate. What made you come from Queensland to Adelaide? 96?
Well, long story short, Martin Leslie was with the Bears at the time and had a little bit to do with the Bears up in Brisbane. And then things didn't work out there, so Martin rang Bob Clayton. Bob Clayton rang me, and then 2 weeks later I was in Adelaide.
Right. So the story, just Tony Bamford win a premiership, is that we just put a tick next to that one, mate? 'Cause
Yeah,
that's how it went, really.
Malacallis out, Bamford in.
Yeah, makes sense.
It was when you came down though. It was only a trial, wasn't it? Mate?
Yeah.
It was only like a
First 4 weeks were just a trial. So all those transfers had to be done by the end of June. So this was at the start of June, end of May, start of June. Played with Kutchi in the reserves for 3 or 4 games it was, and then had a meeting with Steve, because Steve was just taken over from Jack at that point. And Steve said, we'd love you to come back. I said, great, because I'd love to come back. Went home, packed up, came back and been here ever since.
Small forward, rover, mate, that position is nearly redundant now, isn't it? In
It's
the
a lot
AFL
different,
world,
yeah.
mate. What would you be now if you were playing AFL footy, mate?
Very slow.
Very slow. Not today, mate. No, I don't mean today.
It's a good point. The game's changed a lot. Timmy and I used to change in the forward pocket and then rover, and that just does not happen anymore.
No.
It's a different game.
You walked in at a really good time at Alberton as well, because I think they won about 4 or 5 or something in the last 6 or 7 when you arrived.
Yeah.
And they were still winning them. I mean, you arrived 96.
96, yeah. So that was...
They win 96, they
Yeah.
win 98, 99. They're your 3.
Yep.
So it's a pretty good time to land at Alberton, I would think.
I was very, very lucky because I'd had an opportunity to go to Woodville West Torrens probably 2 years before that. But in the end, the club that I was, my local club in Brisbane was just coming good at that stage, and felt I really wanted to be a part of the success there. So I politely declined the invitation to go to the Eagles, and 2 years later I ended up at Port, and yeah, perfect timing.
So mate, I go up to Brisbane now, and footy, I'm assuming when you played, rugby was the big sport, dominated the state, and it still has its part there now, but Aussie Rules footy's taking over Queensland. Have you noticed that?
I have, because the school that I went to, Padua College at Gordon Park, was always a strong rugby union, rugby league team or school. Paul Vorton went to that school. That school now is all Aussie Rules. And rugby's a side sport, so Aussie Rules is now number 1. So it's changing very, very fast. And we saw that this year. When we played the Allies this year, which is a combination of Queensland, New South Wales, NT and Tassie, they were phenomenal, phenomenal team.
Yeah, it's massive
and
growth.
they were a bit of a chopping block a few years ago, the Allies. You could pencil that one in.
Yep.
But I noticed that too, that, hey, hang on, they're giving sides a bit of a hiding themselves right now. So.
Yeah, this year they were the best team by a mile.
Yeah.
And we hadn't seen that from an Allies team before. So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
The academies that they're running up there now in Queensland at both the Lions and Gold Coast, and also the 2 Sydney academies, are doing a great job.
So mate, you're under-18, state coach, mate, development. What's the skills have changed from when you played, when I played, when you played, regardless of what sport. We know the athletes are getting better, the skill demand is higher. What's been the biggest skill focus, you think, in the last couple of years?
It's more about athletic ability these days. It's not the be-all and end-all, but you just can't survive at high levels of football if you can't run fast often. But from a technical aspect, all the things are still the same as what they were 20 years ago. You can't fumble, and you've got to make good decisions, and you've got to be able to kick the ball well. That hasn't changed, it never will. But we see it more and more these days, that the athletes coming through are a bigger, stronger, faster, more powerful than what we were at that age.
But you've got a big emphasis in your training on the skill level, on guys hitting targets and whatever, which I think is absolutely essential today.
Yep.
Because if you turn it over today, you're gone. Your history. So it's the kicking and the handball. You don't want these players missing targets.
Yeah, well,
you don't survive.
No, that's right. Well, we spend a significant amount of every training session doing the fundamental skills, and part of the challenge for us as coaches is making those drills exciting and interesting, because it can be monotonous. But that doesn't mean we don't do them. You have to be able to use the ball really well.
Yeah.
And it's probably not different to when I was... The only thing different, when I was training with Jack and Steve, there was 40 players and 4 footies. Now there's 30 players and 40 footies. So there's plenty of chances for the boys and the girls to improve their skills. But again, we spend a lot more time now on identifying athletic traits a bit earlier than what we used to.
Well, you touched on it before, sorry, but you touched on the fumbling, which is such a key thing when you listen to the coaches talking at the AFL level, and you look at, we'll use Scott Pendlebury as an example. So back when we played footy, head down over the footy, and that's the first thing. Now, if you watch Pendles, he comes from the basketball background, and it's different. I understand the shape of the ball and the role and all that, but because there's so many players around the ball now, are you coaching more about see it, pick it up, and have vision? Because if you put your head over it, by the time you do it, you'd almost be tackled. So that would be almost a new skill that's come in the last few years.
Again, Phil, that's a great observation, because when I was playing as a midfielder, there was less people at the contest. So I could win a ball in a 1v2 situation and still get outside and use my speed. These days, there's more players in that same area. So that's why the midfielders now are bigger and stronger. So we do a lot of training around contest balance and teaching the players about what your role is when you're one of 10 players inside the contest area. Do they win the ball? Do they support the ball carrier? Do they block, or do they get outside to receive? There's so many things happening in that small area of the ground, which is a lot different to what used to happen in the game.
Yeah. Mate, I've got to ask you about the focus of the kids coming through today, the under-18s, the 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds. Their focus would be AFL. That's their goal, their ultimate goal. So, it's a bit... Yeah. Is it difficult to keep them on track, the kid like that? Because it's not the easiest thing to do. You get on an AFL list. So.
No, it's extremely difficult, but it's now considered a career pathway. When I was that age, we were either going to be a carpenter or a baker or a lawyer or an accountant and play football on the side. But now the players come through in their school curriculums now. Football is a career. So there is a huge amount of focus on, I want to be a full-time footballer. Which is easier said than done. So in our programs, alongside of all the technical and tactical aspects of our program, we run wellbeing education sessions to coincide and complement that, because we recognise that in any year that we have, probably 25 to 30% of our players will go into the AFL. The rest go back to our clubs and hopefully have long and successful careers at the SANFL. So we're really big on making sure that they have their plan B ready to go in case they don't get their dream of AFL.
The thing that's always worried me, or not so much worried me, but I really feel for the kids that will sit home and watch the draft, have a couple of mates around, and everything's terrific, and then nothing happens. The mental well-being of that kid is the one I always worry about, and he'd be the most devastated kid in the world. Is that part of the pathway? Is to teach him that this may not happen?
Absolutely, it is, and we're going to experience that in a couple of weeks. With the next draft coming, the pressure that these boys, and I've been in this job for 6 years now, and there's no doubt in my mind in that time the pressure on an athlete who's considered draftable in his under 18 year is twice as much as what it was 5 years ago. And most of that comes through the social media, the amount of media talking about players before they get into the AFL system, the podcasts, the websites, the chat forums. There's just so much focus put on players who are yet to get there. And part of our job in our academy program is to prepare them for the worst result or the not so favourable result if it happens. But it's a constant challenge for us. We've actually introduced into our program this year for the first time ever a sports psych for that very reason, to help us manage player expectation and also inform the parents and caregivers about what to look for, early signs of anxiety and mental health in our athletes. It's a big area.
Should the age be shifted, Tony? Are we drafting them just that year too young?
There's arguments for and against. So, I can see why the AFL have kept it at this age, because they don't want to risk losing athletes to other sports, and that's a very real thing. But I do see a huge benefit in these players getting some real life skills before they enter in such a high pressure environment.
The one I find interesting when you talk about the kids that they're drafting at that age, a lot of them live at home, and so then suddenly, hypothetically, we draft you and you've done it to Melbourne.
Yeah.
You go, now I've got to learn to cook for myself, I've got to learn to feed myself, I've got to learn to do all these things. Even though we talk about preparing it, they don't do it.
Yeah.
And I've had superstars when I was at the Institute, absolute superstars, couldn't even work the washing machine.
Yeah.
They come and go, no, this is a true story. And you go, I just think a year later, you know, you're out of school, you've had a year at uni, you kind of start to mature a little bit. Yeah. That's all, I think they're capable from the footy side of it. Yeah. It's the other stuff, and then that drains them on that side. So it's a big ask to get a young kid
tough one.
to move home, go into state. And I know the clubs do all the right things.
Yeah.
That's and physically some of them are still developing. That depends on the individual. So
the AFL recruiting departments at all clubs spend an enormous amount of time on researching the athlete and their family background. And I'll give you an example. This year we have Kane McAuliffe, who was our best midfielder at Nationals this year from North Adelaide, originally from Port Augusta. The fact that he's been away from mum and dad in Adelaide at a boarding school for 3 years now, he's had 1 year out of school, so he's had to live a real life for 12 months. He's very, very appealing because of those two things.
Absolutely.
Wow.
100%. 100%. Tony, really appreciate your time, mate. I know you're busy, doing a ripping job down there, mate. Hopefully the draft goes well for you and obviously for the players. Tony Bamford, our special guest. Stay with us.